Today, I'm going to show you how to take this boring, lifeless guitar sound and turn it into this. If you've ever wanted to write your own heavy metal song, but you didn't know where to start, or if you're looking for tips to take your recording skills to the next level, you're in the right place. In this video, you'll learn how to build a solid foundation with punchy drums, how to create that wall of sound by layering and widening your guitars, and how to lock in the low-end power with bass that shakes the ground. And I'm about to teach you a 3-step formula on how to make your guitar sound huge, even in a standard tuning. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to record your own heavy metal track, even if you've never done it before. So let's jump in, start chugging, and turn your epic metal riffs into a masterpiece. This is a clean DI. Doesn't sound very metal, does it? A clean DI is a direct input of my guitar, which means that I can change the effects after, I can change the tones, I can add things, I can take things away. Gives you a lot more freedom. And when you're coming up with ideas, it's the best way to find out what kind of tone you want for that song. Here's a kind of tone I usually like using. Most beginners think that the key to heavy guitar sound is the tone. And of course, guitar tone is a piece of the puzzle, but it's only really telling half the story. So here comes the interesting part. 3 steps to make your guitar sound super heavy, even in E standard. Number 1, layer your foundation with drums. Start with a drum track that has a strong punchy kick and an anchoring snare to help drive the song forward. As a bedroom guitar player, I don't know how to play drums, so I rely heavily on drum plugins, especially Superior Drummer 3. One of the greatest things about these plugins is they always come with grooves provided. As you see on the left here, I've got loads of different variations for all the different drum packs that I've got. When I'm writing a song, I'll usually have a theme in mind. I tend to like things like thrash metal or metal machine. And as you can see, there's so many different ones separated by tempo. I click on it, and the great thing is you can just press play and have a listen. If you like it, you just drag it out of it onto the track that you're using, let it go. I'm not going to import the tempo because that will screw up the tempo I've already got, and then move it along to where you want it as an example. That doesn't work, so it's in the wrong place. Let's move it to here. The greatest thing about MIDI is it can be moved around and changed afterwards as well. See, that drum track doesn't really work with the song riff that I've got. So I would then go through and find one that does. Then I kind of do like a jigsaw puzzle, paint by numbers. I'll go through the pre-chorus, verse, chorus, drag them into the project where they fit best, and then map out the song with an idea of what I think would work. If they don't work, I'll just go back and change them, but at least it gives me a rough outline for what I want to do with the song. The great thing about MIDI is you can always go in and you can change the hits afterwards. So if you don't like them, you can grab these and you can just move them around to a better place. Pro tips for everyone out there. You basically want to use your drum kit as a metronome. The cymbals are your 1, 2, 3, 4s, and the snare and the kick can be your 1, 2, 3, 4s also. You basically want to listen out for the cymbals, the snare, and the kick drum. Make sure that they match up with your bass, your guitar, or something else in the song, and make sure that it's giving the song a driving rhythm and pushing it forward. Like I said earlier, the great thing about MIDI is you can move the drum kicks around if they don't fit along with the rhythm you've made, and you can make sure that they fit with the song and the genre you've chosen. For certain parts of the song, like the chorus or a build-up, you can double track things like the snare and the kick. Again, you can just layer up the MIDI to make it sound bigger, but a lot of these drum plugins have the ability to do that with effects on the specific instrument also. And one of my favorite tips that's helped me a lot as a guitarist in my bedroom doing YouTube stuff is different drum styles can give you different ideas. An idea you may have had with a riff may completely change when you put a different drum groove in, and also duplicating a verse later on but changing the drums completely changes that section. So play around with the drum grooves and give them a bit more feel and a different bit of flavor throughout the song. My good friend Shannon Lucas helped me write this song. He laid down the drums and it sounds incredible. What I did was I sent him a drum version and a drumless version. With the drum version, I used loops to give him a skeleton or a benchmark or an idea of where I wanted the song to go. And then I sent him a version with just guitars, no drums, so he could lay down his own ideas. And what you'll hear in a sec is how his expertise and his ideas made the riff stand out 100 times more than I could have even imagined with the things that he threw in that I, a guitarist, not a drummer, wouldn't have even thought of. Here's a riff on its own. So cool plugin I've got going on there. No drums. My idea was just a kind of standard that kind of thing. And I'm going to now show you how his drums make a big difference. So now let's hear how his drums made the song sound 100 times better. One thing I really like that he did, which I never would have done, is he's accenting these cymbals here. You can see them moving around. I never would have come up with that idea because I have no idea about that kind of thing. But he used to be in Black Dahlia Murder, and that was a great thing that he did in that band also. Sounds incredible, makes the song pop so much more than it did before. Then we just got some straight grooves. His feet sound incredible. Listen to this bit. Here it comes. Can't believe it. Sounds great. One thing I really like is, as you'll see on the screen, when I do drums as a guitarist, everything is snapped to the grid. The grid is this line block here that you see. What you'll see on this section is these nodes overlap each other. As a metal guitarist and someone who records their own guitars, I would make sure everything's snapped to the line. But when you're playing with a real person, people aren't robots, people don't snap to grids. And I actually love that he played on electric kit so we can see all that kind of stuff. And it means that it feels more like a real person even though we're using plug-in drums. Sounds incredible. Step 2. Layer and widen your guitar tracks. Now I know what you're thinking straight away. I know, Jamie. I'm going to record one, I'm going to copy and paste it, and I'll duplicate it, pan one left, pan one right. Job's a good one. Don't do that, please. Here's why you should avoid doing that. Here is my first guitar track. I will duplicate it, pan one to the left, pan one to the right. They're both playing. Let's hear how it doesn't sound like we want it to. What we've actually got is what sounds like a centered guitar track, because technically if we have a left and a right of the same guitar, really we just have a centered version. Let's now hear how you're meant to do it. You're actually meant to record both guitars separately, left and right, like so. See, that sounds great. That's because it's two separate guitar takes. It sounds like two separate people rather than the same person just duplicated. Because if you just keep duplicating something, you'll end up with some sort of weird stereo chorus feature. And we don't want that. We actually want it to sound like two separate people. So make sure you record one track, then play along to that one and record the second one. And if you really, really want to, you can do 4 tracks. I think it's really beneficial in things like choruses or pre-choruses or bridges, but not necessarily in verses. And not so much in modern day because you can use plugins to do stereo widening and that kind of thing. But back in the day when Metallica were doing Black Album and those kind of albums, they did like 6 tracks because they wanted that absolute wall of amp sound. If you do really want to do that, just make sure you practice a lot with a metronome because it's really hard to make it not sound like 6 different people. You don't want it to sound like a mush of 6 different people playing at the same time. You actually do want it to sound like 2 separate people left and right, but you just want a wider, thicker sound that spreads across the spectrum. You don't want it to sound all mushy where they don't really blend together. So practice recording well. Step 3, set the low end power with bass. One of the key points to remember is you want to match the bass rhythm with the guitar. This basically allows you to focus on enhancing that low end drive or the riff or the groove because the bass adds an extra level of thickness. Some people actually do it the opposite way. They make the bass follow the drum kit so that they're more of a rhythm section. But if you're in metal, bands like Metallica, up until the Black Album, would have had the bassist just basically playing along with the guitar and doubling it up to add that extra level of thickness. I don't own a bass, not a good enough one to record with anyway, so I tend to use MIDI bass. I use Guitar Pro or I map out the bass in Logic. Here is the bass I've got for this song we've been working on. As you can hear, it pretty much sounds just like the guitar. Now, if I was a good bassist, or I had a friend that could play bass, I would get them to do it with their fingers and they'd come up with some really cool bass things, but I use MIDI because I don't have those options. As you hear, it just sounds like the guitar. I'm using the EZbass Metal bass plugin, as you can see here. It's a 5-string, sounds great. There's loads of presets that you can play around with. People always say, Jamie, why do you even care about bass? You can't hear it anyway. Let's turn the bass off and hear how it sounds without it. Now just turn it back on. I don't know about you, but I think the bass makes it sound so much better. Let's just get to a bit with more driving groove. Here we have no guitars. I think it sounds great. See, bass makes it sound so much thicker, adds an extra wall of tone, and using MIDI bass means that when I go into plugins like EZbass, I can change the presets and I can change how it sounds. I've got things here like for effects and volume, bass and treble, that kind of thing. It means that it's not baked in and I can change it after to make sure that it fits better with the guitars. Some pro tips to remember when you're using bass. A lot of people nowadays, if they're using MIDI bass, they'll have the DI, which we said earlier is a direct input. So that's basically just clean. That's no effects or anything. It's not a clean bass amp. It's just the direct input signal. Then they have a clean bass version, and then they have a gritty bass version, and they somehow blend all three to make one overall fat sound. Whereas other people just like one MIDI bass with just an effect on, like I was doing, because they don't want to really muddy it up and change it too much. A lot of bass is kind of just like a nice, clean, warm sound, and they want that to fit in with the guitars. They don't want to overload it too much. One of my favorite bass tones is Mudvayne. I liked how the guy played with his thumb and popping and slapping and that kind of thing. I'm not a huge fan of the modern bass sound where it does just sound like a guitar that's been low tuned. I really like it to sound like an actual bassist. Another thing you can do, like I said earlier, is you can make sure you either lock in with the guitar riff or the kick drum, either or. Like I said, bands like Metallica back in the day would have done things like got the bassist to play along to the drummer or to the guitarist. When Cliff Burton was in the band, he would have done a lot of bass stuff with the rhythm section. When Jason joined, he actually did follow along with the guitar because I think initially he was a guitarist that was playing bass. Until they did the Black Album when Bob Rock said, hey mate, you should be more of a bassist, you should play along with what Lars is doing. So they changed it up a little bit. Choose your own idea. If you've got a bass player in your band, they're probably going to want to do whatever they want. If you're a guitarist doing it on your own, you might just want to follow along with the riffs. Also, pay attention to things like 5 strings, 6 strings, 4 strings, fingers, picks, that kind of thing. A lot of these plugins have the ability to change whether or not it's played with fingers or with picks, and even things like how old or worn in the strings are. A lot of bassists I know like to have old strings because they get more of a warm sound, whereas a lot of metal bass players would like new, fresh strings to get that more clangy, natural sound. So the natural next step in this process, once you've recorded all the guitars, the bass, the drums, and all that kind of stuff, is to mix it ready for release, master, and all that kind of stuff. Now, let me tell you, the last thing I want to do after recording 134 guitar tracks and making sure it all fits and coming up with all the ideas and solos and all that kind of thing is to then spend hours and hours lamenting over snare sounds and guitar tones and making sure it all fits in the mix. I'm not very good at that. I'm a guitarist. I don't really like messing around with production, so I usually send it to someone else to do it for me. Here's where Toontrack have got me covered. As a bedroom guitarist who posts on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok and those kind of places, I just want to get out my song as quickly as possible. They have an aptly named program called EZmix that makes my job so much easier. EZmix can be used in many different ways. What I'm going to do first is make what's called track stack, which is essentially just a folder for the guitars. This way, any effects I add to these guitars will apply to both of them. I don't need to apply to each track. So if I had 6 guitars, my computer would get heavily overloaded if I put EQ, compression, reverb, delay, all that kind of stuff on every single track. If you don't have a super duper powerful computer, you're probably not going to want to do that. So using a guitar bus or a stack, as they're called, makes it a little bit easier and less power hungry for your computer. As you see here on the left, it says bus 1. If I now add an effects to that and I go to EZmix stereo, you'll see how easy EZmix is to use. So you'll see here on the screen, I've got guitar. So I've got a guitar, I've got an electric guitar. Now I get these nodes here, but I'm going to point your direction to the right hand side. We have all of these different things that we can go through. One of my favorite ones to use, which I'll show you with it both on and off as you scroll all the way through, as I've got a star here, it's guitar bus 1. If I now solo the guitar bus, you'll just hear the guitar on its own. If I turn this off, so we're not using it at all, turn it back on again, you can hear how it makes a difference. So these are applying all of these different things down here on the left, chug defeating. They're basically jargonless ways to explain what it's doing. So chug defeat, I'm imagining is some sort of compression or limiting. But for people like me who have no idea what that means, it makes it a little bit easier to understand. Guitar cruncher, declouder, all these kind of things, they just do different things to the guitars and they suit different purposes. I can even add reverb if I wanted. As you hear there, it got a bit overloaded. That's something that you would probably apply to a clean guitar, not a distorted one. So now I've done this, I'm going to go back to my bus 1, which is one of the ones I like. That is now affecting all of the guitar tracks. Now I'm just going to show you how much of a difference a guitar bus actually makes. I'll turn it on, I'll turn it off, and I'll go through guitar bus 1 all the way through to guitar bus 4, and then finally I will change the individual parameters of one of the buses to show how much of a difference each dial really makes. And that's actually affecting both of those DI signals. So if I turn that off, we've just got clean banjo sounds again. Turn it back on, and we've got distortion. So that makes life a little bit easier as well. You don't need to have a guitar plugin on each track. You can actually apply it to the stack track as well. Now with bass, I'm only going to apply it to the bass track itself. I haven't made a stack because I'm not using more than one bass track. Go to audio effects. Again, go back to EZmix in stereo. Now we can choose bass from here, and we've got mix tools or amps. I actually just want mix tools because we already have a plugin on there. And again, on the right hand side, we've got low end focus, tech bass room, acoustic bass, that kind of thing. Let's solo the bass on its own. Make sure nothing else is on. Turn that off so we can hear how it sounds. They sound really good. So as you can see, having MIDI bass makes it a lot easier to mess around with this kind of stuff. If we want distortion, pre-EQ, low bass, slap control, bass compressor. Here we go, we've got distortion as well. So as you can see, EZmix isn't just about mixing, it's also about adding tones to your bass and your guitars as well. I like things just like simple bass EQ. Let's turn the drum back on. Now with drums, you might actually want to apply that to a specific drum bus. Again, I don't do that because I don't really do mixing myself. So I could, let's just see if we can do this, add a drum EZmix to it. So we've got full kit here. This is useful. On the right hand side again, we can change how the drum sounds. So let's just turn the bass back off. Oh wow, we've got a broken bass drum here, which sounds really weird. Sounds like an 8-bit thing. I'm going to make sure that I've got the EZmix 3 filters on. We've got drum kit, we've got metal, and we've got group bus. Here we go, let's try this. Yeah, I think it is actually doing something. Generally, what you might want to do is solo each instrument of the drum kit, so the kick, the snare, the cymbals, into their own tracks, and then apply these filters to those in a bus. But we're not doing that. We just want it to sound good for sending on to Instagram and those kind of things. Let's turn the metal one off, and we can now use a different one. Oh wow, we've got some sort of flanger going on there. This sounds like an alien. Lo-fi? Oh yeah, we've got more reverb now. Definitely making a difference. So yeah, like I said, you probably would, if you were doing this as someone who knew what they were doing, unlike me, apply different EZmix filters to each drum, the kick drum, the toms, that kind of thing. But because I was just going to post it on Instagram, I would do it to just the overall track. What you can then do is actually have like a master track. So on this master stereo out here, we can add an audio effect again, another instance of EZmix. And as you see here, we have the option to do mastering, We can do AI assisted, or we can just go through presets. I like AI assisted, so let's have a look. If I turn all the tracks back on, there is actually a way for the presets to analyze your track. So on the right hand side here again, if I look for something that would work for us, so we've got Metal Master Melodic or Modern. Let's try Melodic. And then on the left here, you can see we can analyze the track. So if I press this, it's going to ask for the loudest part. Let's find the loudest part. I think it's this bit here. It's now going to listen to the track, as you see here, and it's going to analyze all the different parts of it, the guitars, the bass, the drums, and it should master it for us in a way that makes it presentable. There you go, I think it's done. Oh, there we go. That's loud. That's quite loud. So mastering is something you do once you've finished mixing, which we haven't really done. So that's just an example of how AI can do that for us. But once you've done the mixing, the AI can then master it for you to make it ready for things like YouTube, Instagram, Spotify, iTunes, that kind of thing, because they all have their own standards of how loud it's got to be. So if you're like me and you want to start mixing and you have no idea where to go first, look no further than EZmix by Toontrack. It really helps me get my songs from start to finish and be able to post them on social media, Spotify, iTunes, that kind of thing, and not worry too much about the minute detail and focus more on the songwriting and making an epic metal song stand out on the internet. I hope you learned some tips from this video on how to start writing metal songs all the way to mixing it and releasing it as well. Make sure you don't copy and paste guitar tracks and you record 2 separate ones and pan them left and right. Always add some punchy bass and make sure your drums fit with the song and they're in the right tempo and they follow the genre to make your song punchy and stand out more. Check out the link in the description for all these Toontrack plugins and go out and write some metal riffs. Thanks for watching. If you're looking to set up your own home studio or upgrade your current one, check out my list of recommended gear on my website. It's packed with everything I use and what I recommend to get your studio up and running. Click the link in the description below and take a look.